Well, welcome in. Happy Quarantine Tuesday to you all. It's great to have you here with us on P3, the Pro Production Podcast. My name is Nick Olson. I am your host, and we are looking forward to having a great night with you. For me, it's self-isolation day number many, like most of you, I'm sure, that are experiencing this fun time that we're having. And I've realized recently that now if I had an old MySpace friends board, that my 3-month-old daughter would be number 2 or 3 on my list of top friends, maybe right or before or after my dog. So glad you've joined us tonight. Really looking forward to socially interacting with all of you, and it should be a great time. So tonight we are talking about video for video. That's the name of the episode tonight, and it's kind of a stupid name, but it's kind of not too, right? So what we're talking about here is we are talking about video for video in the sense of utilizing different video sources within your broadcast and your live stream, from projection systems to LED systems. That's kind of the whole gist of the night and what we're talking about. And we've got a great guest. He's worked for many great and large artists. Simon Roberts is joining us too. So really excited to have him on. But before we welcome Simon onto the show tonight, this person needs no introduction, and their bunny above them needs no introduction either. I want to welcome him in now. Brady Davis. Brady, how are you?
Hey, Nick. Good to see you, man.
Hey,
it's funny you mentioned the bunny. It's funny you mentioned the bunny. I talked to my wife about it last week, and she was so excited that somebody loved her bunny. And we also have a deer on the other side of the wall, so she might just swap them and see if you guys realize. If you realize when we swap over to the deer, let us know, and maybe there'll be a prize in it for.
Now, question: is it like
a little Easter egg? Is
it like a deer head? Like, is it gonna be? Because I think most people would probably notice if a deer head all of a sudden appeared over top of you.
Yet to be determined, and you guys will find out.
Okay, that's great. Brady, what have you? What was your dinner tonight? How's your day been? What have you been doing?
Yeah, dinner was great. We made some homemade barbecue chicken pizza. Typically do that on the grill, but for time's sake, just did it in the oven, and it was phenomenal. Had a little Caesar salad with it. Day's been going pretty well. Pretty busy all throughout the day with work stuff, and then just spending time with the family before jumping on and hanging out with you guys for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, and I love that you spent a lot of time working on your cable management tonight, so that the cable is tied up around your microphone. So that was really nice. So, well, I think the person. Thank you, I appreciate it. The person that we're really here to talk to and to get their insight instead of just listening to Brady and I blabber all night long. At this point in time, I want to welcome in Simon Roberts. Simon, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, Nick?
It's going great here. Thank you for joining us. And I know that we didn't necessarily get a chance to talk too much before this because we've been busy here, and we've been working on some new additions that we're doing to the show. So it's gonna kind of be a free for all tonight, right? I'm excited just to have some great impromptu conversations with you, and yeah, we can just kind of go wild tonight, right?
With many eyes watching.
Simon, when was the last time you saw someone in person?
Earlier today, but from a distance of about 15 feet.
That's what they recommend now. Yeah, they say the 6 feet thing is no longer applicable. It's now you've got to be farther away than that.
Yeah, well, the spray and the aerosol or the droplets, rather, they're now saying it's closer to 25 feet or longer.
25. See, now that's Brady. Here we are. Now, one of the things that is it's just kind of gross in general, because I guess now we're realizing if the droplets go 25 feet, that's just nasty, right? I mean, for not just coronavirus, but for future too.
I mean, that's a cough or a sneeze, but yeah, from what I understand. But yeah, that's a lot farther than you would think.
I'll never look at coughs and sneezes the same way then if I'm within 25 feet of someone. So, but yeah, enough about that, because I'm sure everyone is hearing about it all the time. Simon, tell us what you do, who you are, what's your background, how you got started in this, your education. Tell us everything about you, including your social security number, mother's maiden name, and date of birth, please.
And first car, right? As everyone's putting on Facebook now.
Yes.
I'm Simon Roberts. I do I do video for live events. Primarily touring concerts. I do mainly media server programming and operation, and video engineering. So I work for a number of different artists. Most recently, Keith Urban, done some stuff with Lauren Daigle. We did her last tour programming. Lady Antebellum, I was out with for a couple of years. Blake Shelton, I've been out with for a couple of years. So a variety of different artists and different different genres as well. But yeah, that's about me.
And we're gonna later on, I want to get into any maybe cool experiences you've had with those artists. But before that, so how did you get into this? What education do you have, if any, specifically with production? Like, what's your backstory here? How did you get involved with doing production? Yeah, so
from the very at the very beginning, my mother ran a theater company. She was the musical director when I was about 8 years old. She started a theater company with a few other colleagues of hers for high school students, and so I was always at the rehearsals, music rehearsals, and with not much to do. So I would go over into the theater next door to the rehearsal space, and try to help out the the lighting designers and tech directors and those those sorts of people. So I was always interested in tech. My dad was an equity stage manager, as well as an IT guy. So the technology and the theater definitely are both all heavily ingrained in my upbringing. But yeah, so after that, I did a lot of theater work up in Indianapolis, where I'm from. Community theaters, semi-professional theaters, doing lighting design for them, and then went to work for a company locally doing concert lighting. And it wasn't until I moved down to Nashville, I had a company offer me a job down here doing video, which at that point, a lot of lighting guys go, "Oh, I won't touch video." But yeah, I moved down to Nashville, where I am now, and worked for that company for a couple of years, and then went on tour with a few different artists and in different roles, as like from LED to front of house lighting tech to engineer, director, several roles but mainly in video now that I'm touring.
So now here's the real question: what's better, lighting or video?
It's funny. I wouldn't say either are better.
Okay.
I prefer doing video, but now that I've got more time, I'm trying to get back into programming lighting. So they're very so media servers are, since they're controlled with lighting consoles anyway, for the most part, they're basically one and the same now.
By the end of the show, we want to know.
You need to give like a straight up answer to that, Simon, and you have 2 hours.
Yeah, so I feel like we're really beating around the bush here.
Well, after a few more beers, I might be willing to make a decision.
Yes, that's what I wanted to hear. That's what I wanted to hear. Hey, so before we go any farther, I just want to let you guys know real quick in chat too. We're taking your questions later on tonight via phone. We're also taking your questions now via Facebook and via YouTube. Facebook.com/Force Tech Solutions. You can ask your questions there, as well as the YouTube page. Simon, one of the reasons he's here is to answer your questions too. So Simon has great experience with high-level video production, and whatever Simon doesn't know, maybe Brady or I can kind of fudge through too. So taking your questions there. And if you're watching right now over on Facebook, head over to the YouTube page. It's better quality, full 1080. And also, we need help too to get that permalink, so you can go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube page there. That'll help us along. So instead of me just telling you to go over to our YouTube page, I can say youtube.com/something. So anyways, getting back now into it, Simon, we've got a lot of great questions lined up for you here, but kind of first and foremost, talk through a day in the life of Simon Roberts. Well, you can talk us through a day in the life of coronavirus Simon Roberts, but talk us through that. And
currently, coronavirus Simon Roberts gets up, about 4 or 5 p.m. and then the time of day doesn't matter, day of the matter doesn't week. The points are all made up. The money doesn't matter. But yeah, no. So on a typical, especially touring, when you get into a rhythm, typically, we're loading in at, between 7 or 10 p.m. or sorry, 10 a.m. Dumping trucks. We're planning especially in festival season, everything's different. So I'm coming in, I'm looking at video walls, I'm looking at what we've got available, working with the video director to try to figure out, how one, I can display the content and what we need on that festival wall, and two, that the video director has what he needs to do, to cut cameras and deliver that to screens. So that starts pretty early in the day, on a typical festival day. On a tour, it's more locked in stone. You're flying the same rig every day. They'll come in, we'll chalk rigging points, or the rigger will chalk rigging points, hang lighting trusses, hang video. I generally start working maybe 1 or 2 p.m. in the afternoon once the rig's up, making corrections, adding content, reprogramming songs if the artist has changed. We've added 4 bars to this intro. So that's, you take that time in the afternoon to kind of rework your show. Then you get a little, kind of dinner break and lunch break, obviously when you can take that. After dinner, hopefully you get a nap in, or, a nice little walk outside, depending how dialed in the show is. And then, showtime. You do opening acts. A lot of touring video guys. So we'll, with opening acts, we'll all kind of pitch in and rotate out, directing or, cutting cameras with some of the smaller acts who just don't, they don't have the facilities to bring their own people. So we'll do that. And then, it's the headliner. We do a 2.5 hour show sometimes, and sometimes it's 2 hours. It really depends on who the artist is. And then you load out and then go to bed and then get up and do it again the next day, and then hopefully get a day off at some point out on the road, But so once you kind of get into that groove, though, that's the best part about touring, I think, is you get into that groove of this is your schedule, this is how you do your day, and you just keep going and going.
That's awesome. How set in stone is, or I'm sure it depends on the artist, but how set in stone is that set list typically? Is it really just depend on the artist, or will they throw you for a curveball, or is it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And so usually, really depends on the artist. A lot of most pop that I have worked with is pretty theatrical and produced. So it's, you've got to show things segue into each other. There's video interludes. There's bits happening on stage. Whereas rock and country are a little more. Rock and roll, a lot of bands, it's just they'll start playing a song, and you better hope you
jump
on
up
the right
go.
one, or the tracks guy has the right one, or exactly, or whoever, or a lot of rock bands, it's lighting directors are punting everything, so really there's a lot of content cues because there's no time code or anything. So it really depends on the band. Pop is generally more set in stone. They may add or take away things, but it's generally pre-rehearsed and very very produced. But like a country act will, you'll get an artist who, I'm going to play a solo that's 2 minutes longer than normal, or it really depends on the artist.
Yeah, that's awesome insight. How long have you been on the road full time now?
Full time, I've been touring since beginning of 2016 touring. But I did corporate,
so almost 4 years,
and and festivals and stuff. Yeah, so touring, I'm on, almost 4 years now.
What's been your favorite city and venue? Because I'm sure you have a favorite city, and then I'm also sure you have a favorite venue. Or does the venue follow the city?
So really, it really depends. So I have a lot of favorite cities. One of my I love New York City. Especially if you have a day off there. I'm trying to think where else. London is gorgeous. Berlin is wonderful. I was lucky to have the opportunity to have several days of, kind of pre-production, where we had a lot of free time last year in Berlin. So you spent a lot of time walking around the city and just kind of exploring the German culture there, and various different kind of less touristy sightseeing things. But we were right across from the Berlin Wall, where we were staying. So a lot of really great history in a lot of these cities we visit. But as far as venues, there's a lot of really amazing cities where the venues you go to, Madison Square Garden is notorious for being fairly difficult to load in. There's a big corkscrew ramp that goes up, so you are forking everything off of the back of trucks in downtown New York City, and then it's being driven up this corkscrew ramp up to the 5th floor. I believe it's 5th floor where Madison Square Garden is. And it's a very strong union, so there's set lunch breaks, and you're dark for this amount of time, and so that's a city that I love having a day off in, but it's more challenging to do shows there sometimes.
So now, your Instagram page, which was on your lower third, we'll bring that back up, is Simon the Video Guy, right? So, but ironically, if you go to your Instagram page, it's really more Simon the Drink and Food Guy, right? As you take a drink there. So tell me, you're traveling all over the world, and one of the things you love to do, obviously, is to eat great food and drink good drinks as well. So tell me about that. What places have you been? What weird drinks and foods have you tried? What are some of your favorite things?
Yeah, I mean, it really just kind of depends on the city. I mean, I usually try to kind of do a little bit of research. If I know I've got a couple days off or a day off in somewhere that the Southwest in the United States has a lot of like amazing I say Tex-Mex, but Southwestern kind of fusion between Mexican and American foods down there. There's a lot of really great seafood up in Pacific Northwest. A lot of great sushi and other kind of fish driven things, because you're on the coast with a big fishing culture. So it really depends kind of where we're going, and a lot of times I research, and a lot of times I'll just leave the hotel and take a walk and kind of stumble into someplace.
Now, you let me try the grossest drink ever in Las Vegas, which was what?
It's fantastic. Fernet Branca is wonderful.
Fernet Branca. If you ever have the option to try Fernet Branca, don't. It's gross. It's like minty. It's just not good.
It's meant as an after dinner. It's an Italian after dinner. They call them amaro, which means bitter. So it's an after dinner drink meant to kind of if you've had a big meal and drank a lot of wine or whatever, kind of soothes the stomach and
opposite.
It's meant for that.
Sounds wonderful to me.
It's not
bitter
good.
It's very popular among a lot of service industry people, bartenders. So in these cities where I go visit restaurants and try to make friends with the managers and servers of places, it's kind of a custom. If they like you, they'll offer you a shot, or you offer to buy them a shot of Fernet Branca, and you take it together. And then that's how I made friends in a lot of random cities, and gotten recommendations for other really great places. You just make friends with the locals, and they a lot of times have the best recommendations.
That's awesome. I wouldn't recommend that drink. It's also expensive, but most of your other drinks that I've had, on point. So once we're released from this quarantine, we'll go out and do it in Las Vegas again. So jumping more into the tech stuff now, jumping into why people are here, not necessarily that they don't want to hear about Simon, but jumping into what Simon does. Simon, tell me now, you're helping create these large scale really video systems, but also environmental systems, because that's what video systems are turning into now. Tell me, who out there in the industry right now is your inspiration? Who are you looking to seek inspiration from, or maybe it's not even a person, maybe it's something that you're seeking inspiration as you help design these large scale systems?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple people that have really sort of kind of taken me under their wing and have been really good, kind of mentors and have taught me a lot about different aspects, whether it's technology or just the business of being in entertainment. Too many to really name. Those people who've been doing it for a really long time are definitely an inspiration, and I strive to be like that. But there's also people, there's newcomers in the I'm definitely a newcomer, but there's people who are new, whether it's new technologies, there's new manufacturers, there's new like augmented reality is a new big one, and so that's there's people that wasn't a thing a couple years ago, and so there's people who threw themselves into that and then have brought it into the entertainment industry. So definitely just the sheer amount of people who are pushing the limit and creating something that hasn't been created before, or improving on it. Those are the people that I look to either emulate or be as good as.
Okay, now this is not on the show roadmap, but tell me, augmented reality. What experience? What has been implemented there in live production with augmented reality?
Gotcha. Yeah. So the blanket term is XR. So that's virtual reality, augmented reality, and a couple of others. So basically, the current workflow now is it's basically virtual sets, but it's not only virtual sets with a green screen and a static person not moving. You can put trackers on the cameras, and you can move the cameras around person, or the person can move and interact with that virtual space. But it's generally done, with an LED floor, and you'll have 2 LED walls, and you'll kind of position them in the corner. That way, you have a fully enclosed, sort of like a green screen, but it's a virtual set basically. But you can interact real time with camera positioning, and it's a 3D space that tracks and gets applied to that 2D plane.
I think I saw something similar to that at the Row booth last year at NAB or Infocom, one of the two.
Yeah.
Where they
yep,
were
that was
using
a program called Disguise. Yeah, so they I believe that was it was Disguise media servers and Unreal Engine that they were using, and then some camera tracking on a jib that allowed you to move around the subject. And when you're looking at it on screen, it's not meant for really live events. It's meant for broadcast or streams or things where you can force perspective in this frame. Whereas if you look at it in real life, it's just like this weirdly shifting perspective that just looks flat and gross. But you look at it on a screen, and it's 3D, and it's very complex.
Okay, now you said Unreal Engine. I don't have a ton of experience with either of these things, but I know Unreal Engine, isn't that something they use in video games? So what is that?
It is. Yeah, so Unreal Engine, so Epic Games has put a lot of time and money into developing the live entertainment side of that. But most of Unreal Engine's usage has been in video games up until now. I mean, Unreal Tournament was the first one that really kind of put it on the board. I think we're on version Unreal Engine 4 now, but it's really good real-time rendering and interactivity, and because it's built for video games, all these people connecting and running around and doing things in real time. But the quality has gotten so good that we could do virtual sets in it now, or create content in it and not have to render it out. You can in real time play it back.
That's incredible. Besides kind of that AR and that new piece of technology that's coming to the grass, what piece of technology is on the horizon that you're really looking forward to, that's either going to help your workflow or help how you do things, either creatively or technically? What's new that's coming that you're super pumped about?
Yeah, so the really cool thing that I've heard is people are working on is the ability to spread processing over multiple media servers. So you could just have a rack of 6 media servers, and it's sharing all the processing and GPU load in real time. So then outputs are whether it's outputting to a physical device or it's going to a stream, you're able to basically cluster all these machines together and create these massively powerful real-time things or playback rigs. Without having to, you just add another machine, and I need more power, you add another machine. Whereas before, it's you're limited in output by physical machine and also processing power. But that's something that I think multiple manufacturers are working on right now, and it's going to be pretty cool when that happens. Question:
the stuff that you're running the shows with, how much money can I make mining Bitcoin off of that?
About $0.01 every 2 days, because Bitcoin mining is no longer profitable.
That's not
on
actually
GPUs.
That's not what I wanted to hear. So, speaking of new technology, all right. So we hear all the time now about 4K, 8K, and potentially beyond. And you know, in our world of doing integration for corporations, house of worship, even broadcast, that, you know, those things are not really present yet, right? So tell me, with what you're seeing, are you seeing it being present, or are you still seeing what we're seeing, which is it's an aggregation? You know, it's used for bringing in video and maybe cropping it, doing pan and scan type stuff with 4K and 8K, and it's not really a means yet of transmission or even people receiving it on end devices. But what are you seeing there?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely we're heading towards 8K. I'm seeing more that we're being pushed outside of 4K space. So you're using multiple outputs. Your content is bigger than 4K, especially on like a lot of high-res product or really big walls. That being said, most of the input devices like live camera feeds are still at most running 1080p from what I'm seeing. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's people using 4K, but it's not widespread. I mean, most of the tours that I'm seeing still are using 720p or 1080i. As camera.
That's
sources.
a really good point too, because when I think of the words 4K and 8K, you generally think of cameras, right? But you know, at the same time, you know, we're talking about that word also, obviously 4K and 8K. Those are resolutions that can be applied to anywhere within a video system, including, you know, you see something like U2's large LED wall. Obviously, that has to be a really high resolution signal to be able to be exploded that much. Otherwise, you know, if it was just a 1080 signal, obviously there are more physical pixels in that wall than there are, you know, the input resolution. So that's when you run into, you know, it doesn't look as nice. So yeah, I guess talking about 4K and 8K, there's the camera side of things, there's the input side of things, and then there's the, you know, getting content to things like LED walls or even large projection systems, maybe, you know, one 8K feed that's utilizing multiple projectors, right?
Generally outputs for the most part are limited to 4K still. You can push more. I mean, there's, you know, things like HBR3 in which you can theoretically push, you know, 8K at 60, 420 chroma subsampling, but no one's really utilizing it. For one, I mean, it's just really high bandwidth. Cable lengths go down to nothing. You might be able to do a rack jumper, or, you know, to a monitor, but most terminal gear is not running 8K. So what I'm seeing more of is 4K being split into multiple 1080s. Whether that's an FX4 or a VFC card in a disguised server, or an AJA HA5 4K, where you're taking that 4K physical output of your media server and then you're utilizing 4 different, and a lot of times discrete 1080p feeds. But that workflow, you know, say you have a server that has two 4K outputs, you essentially have 8 HD outputs because you can utilize that pixel space however you want it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's the way I've seen it most commonly used, especially with the I don't know the model of them, but the Aja units. What did you say those were? The HD. The
HA5 4K. Yeah, I mean, and it's a pretty economical solution. I think they're in the $500 range if I remember correctly. So instead of building,
it's easier to take a single output and split it into, you know, 4 times and get a larger canvas, a single 4K output, than it would be to spit out, you know, 4 individual 1080 outputs out of a machine.
It really depends. It's kind of 6 to 1, half a dozen another. I mean, obviously you're getting a little bit of processing latency with, you know, when you're introducing any sort of splitter or, you know, it varies by manufacturer. Some of them are less than a frame, they claim. Some of them are, you know, a couple frames. So, you know, if you can avoid that, sure, but, you know, the cost of a media server that has 6 outputs, is much higher than a media server that has 2 outputs, which you can then split into 1080s, especially if you're working in the 1080 space. You know, a lot of people I see will use a 2 output machine to play back several 1080p signals.
Now, we've got a question here in chat. And before we get to that, Simon, I do want to say again, we're taking your questions in the Facebook chat as well as the YouTube chat. You can find both of those, facebook.com/Force Tech Solutions. And then there's a link on the Facebook page to the YouTube page right now if you want to watch in higher quality, and hit that subscribe button to help us out. But one of the questions that we have right now, Simon, is it says here, what is your workflow out of Unreal? Can you talk about that, or a standard workflow out of Unreal?
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, as far as I don't do a ton of Unreal, I generally on the couple things I've worked with Unreal, that's one of the things I'm trying to learn in my time, that we have now. I've been doing a fair amount of Notch, which is another real-time generative. But from what I understand, the workflow out of Unreal it's still very dependent on like third-party protocols like NDI and OSC to be able to put back and forth tracking data and things like that. It's not. No media server has yet fully integrated it in as a live link. From what I understand, I know they're working on that, but Unreal's. Have you heard of anyone that's utilizing it on a large scale right now? Like, is there anyone specifically that's utilizing it well? That's yeah, there's a few. Yeah, I mean, NASCAR, I believe, uses a version of Unreal to do a lot of their like virtual studio stuff. Zero Density is one of them. So it's built in Unreal, but the company Zero Density has made a platform to do specifically augmented reality with Pixotope is another one. Viz RT, which Viz, they made kind of like Chiron style lower third generators. Now they're working on real time.
Okay,
but I believe all three of those are built in Unreal Engine.
Okay, that's awesome. And before I mention this too, we're taking phone calls now. 317-586-2844. I didn't have to look at my notepad. It's the first time I haven't had to do that. That's how many times I've said that number. But moving on, we've talked about a lot of complex things that are well over my head. So now, real quick, explain to me a standard workflow of any video system so that we can bring everybody back and get everyone on the same page and say, hey, our video systems is composed of a camera, routers, switchers, whatever, and tell me about, then maybe expound on that then after we dive into what are the standard components and then how you're utilizing that, because really every system's kind of made up of the same components. It's just on what scale, right?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, at the very basic level, a video system for most applications is some way to switch sources, whether that's a camera, a graphics machine. I mean, any number of sources, live stream feed that you're getting in, lower thirds, a way to switch that, and then a way to, or something to send it to, whether that's projection, you're going out to a live stream. So that basic concept is, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a way to change between sources, whether you're using vMix or OBS, or whether that's a physical switcher like a Grass Valley. The purpose is to be able to change between sources seamlessly and deliver it, whether that's to side screens, to a media server to put on upstage wall, or creative elements, or whether that contains cameras. I mean, it really depends on what your application is.
So with what you're doing, explain to me, because they're simple, right? There's cameras, routers, switchers, in devices. Explain to me now how complex that gets when we're talking about large-scale arena stadium tours.
Yeah, so I mean, so when you get to that level, just like taking it from camera down, you've got a camera, which generally has a large broadcast lens on it. It doesn't have very much control on it. All of that goes over SMPTE fiber or Triax back to your engineering rack or your truck, into a CCU. Then the camera control unit is controlled by a remote control panel where you can adjust iris and white balance and any number of settings, like matrices in the cameras, the circuitry itself. and then that's going into routers, and it's getting return feeds back out to the cameras so they can see sometimes multiple return feeds. A specific instance, I was on a tour, we had a diamond, an LED wall that flew down, and that was one of the main sources of IMAG, but you can't really see that in return. So I used a keyer in the rack. I had like 6 of them, open gear cards from Ross, that I was setting a key back as an individual return so they could trigger and see their own camera in that diamond shape. But that's hitting usually a 64 by 64 or bigger router in the system rack. It's going out to VTR. It's going to engineering monitors, directors monitors, side screens, back into media servers. So there's a lot of different places that signal can hit, and routers are pretty much how we manage all that, and DAs in those system racks.
What are some things that before you started doing this, that you knew the basics obviously of video, but what are some things that really were hard to grasp that kind of threw you for a loop in these large scale productions, or even something that's now it's like, this works, we set it up once, but it's very difficult. If this gets messed up, it's a showstopper. Like, what are one of those things that maybe people aren't used to in just normal standard video productions?
I mean, definitely, being able to, when I first started, everyone can, in the industry, should be able to troubleshoot signal flow, whether that's video signal, audio signal, whatever. The thing with video is it encompasses so many different transport protocols and different medium. I'm picking up video signals, I'm picking up DMX signals from lighting consoles to control media servers. I'm sending out signals to control robo cameras. So the biggest thing for me was learning proper networking technique, and it was very important. And I luckily I had kind of a background in that growing up, but that's always something as new protocols are coming out and more fancy switches and different protocols like NDI and SMPTE 2110. It's always keeping up with that, and so that's something that I'm still facing is, okay, how do I stay up on this standard? What pieces of equipment do I need to be familiar with? And a lot of times that's right before you go on a tour or a show, you're learning about it a couple weeks beforehand, that specific piece of equipment.
How adventurous are you? I mean, what are you willing to mess with, to play around with? Obviously, the stakes are huge here, right? You're working, and we're going to get to our most professional, unprofessional, or unprofessional, professional moment later, the new segment of the show. But tell me, how risky are you? Does it depend on how many beers we've had that day, or what? Like how crazy do we want to get before doors open, and we're willing to try some things?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, generally no beers, while working. That's
of course. I mean, that was a joke.
Well, no,
right?
that's definitely a rule. Some people you work for or whatever are fine with it. I just have this rule of it's Murphy's Law, right? If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Why would I'm not going to impair myself in being able to troubleshoot efficiently. If it's a program, if you're pre-programming or whatever, that's one thing. But actual shows, that's like you said, the stakes are pretty high. That being said, no, I generally don't like to get risky with things unless there's a backup. So we're trying, say you're trying a new technology that's worked most of the time, but you've had issues. What's plan? Plan B is, okay, go to the backup. What's plan C? How do we route camera feed directly to the screen, or can we just play back basic content? So it's I'm fine with pushing the envelope as far as technology goes, but always having those basic things, whether it's a router you trust or a switcher you trust, or cameras and being able to go back to basics. Because at the end of the day, if this fancy sparkle thing around their face doesn't work with real-time tracking whatnot for 5 minutes while you get it sorted out, it's better to have it, I think, have clean IMAG appearing, have content playing, have a show still going, so that that your audience and your artist, for that matter, is not is none the wiser. Because that throws off their, depending who it is, can throw off their whole mindset. They're there to do a show.
Now, having all those building blocks, having all those parts and pieces together after your system build, having all of that experience. You get a call tomorrow, new tours coming up, new artists, maybe you haven't worked with that team before. What is it like getting into the creative aspect of stage design and graphics formation? Is the artist a part of a lot of those conversations? Is it their management team that's driving those conversations? Do you get to jump in on those conversations and help with stage design and graphics? Or talk to us through what's it like. Simon Roberts, you're getting a call tomorrow, new artist. What's next?
Yeah, so it really depends, who you were hired by and what your job is. If you're an associate designer, you definitely have more artist interaction than you have, if you're just a server tech or a video engineer. A lot of the times the designer will sit with management and the artist and figure out, the overall design, and then that designer will bring in either their programmer or the programmer the artist trusts. Like if you're on their staff, you just say, hey, you're going to use my lighting guy and my video guy to do this. But it's really every gig is different. The level of opinion, and there's some gigs you go in and the designer has a very set in stone, and you don't give your opinion and you make it happen. And there's others that you work with who are very collaborative, and it's, oh, well, what do you think about this? Ooh, let's try this. And then you go, oh, what do you think if I do this in blue? And then you show it to them and they love it. So it really depends on for one, the artist, because some just just make the lights pretty, and some are like, no, I know I want this song blue, I want this song green. It really depends on who you're working with, what your context is, and who the designer is.
Who typically is that final decision maker, or is it always the artist? Does it always stop at the artist, or does it depend on the artist? Or are some artists like, yeah, I trust my team, this should all come together hopefully, or is it always getting ran to get the final check off?
It really depends, but at the end of the day, it's any like corporate gig or whoever's paying for it, and at the end of the day, the person up there singing on stage is the one basically paying for it. They're the only, them and merch are the only two money makers on a tour, everyone always says. So everyone else is a line item. It really depends on the artist though.
Can you translate that creative process down to a smaller production? Doesn't have to be, specifically House of Worship, those B-level, C-level touring groups who, all of us love to go to on 4th of July cookouts. I go back to a little bit before what you're doing now. What was that creative process like with those?
That's if we have 4th of July cookouts this year. Go ahead with the question.
Shut it, Nick.
Yeah, no, so that's a very good question. I think that can be definitely applied at I don't want to say lower, on a smaller scale. But it's definitely important to have a central creative plan. An idea of what you want, a design or a mentality or kind of color palettes or whatever that is. But there needs to be kind of a central funnel and a couple people who can say, okay, now this is really what we want. And a lot of times, in small places, that's a director of production at a church or a pastor, or the leadership within the church. But or same with corporate. It's usually generally the planner of the event, but also the CEO or whatever. I don't like that color green. You generally, you change it. So the kind of the buck stops with, who's paying for it, whose event is it, or concert. But on a smaller scale, that could be, the band, the artist, or it could be their management.
Okay, now let's say Jeff Bezos is paying for it. The sky is the limit. You can have anything you want. Personally, in your tool bag of your fly kit that you're taking with you, or even just if you're designing a tour in general, what are the go-to pieces of equipment you're going with? What's going in your bag, and then what's going out in trucks too? What are the things that you're just like, man, I wish I had that piece of gear?
Yeah, I'm always kind of a geek for test equipment. So, even as a media server programmer, I like carrying a, waveform monitor. One, to verify signal from, if I'm getting, at a local festival and a guy's saying, oh no, that camera image looks fine. And then I can go, okay, well no, your black level's at, 30 IRE and it's washed out and disgusting. Being able to verify. So, definitely some sort of fancy new vector scope waveform pattern generator.
What's one of those new fancy things? I know we have a fancy Tektronix that is really, really cheap. But what, like, are there like the Bentleys of vector scopes?
Yeah, I mean, Tektronix and Leader both make some very, very pricey and nice units that have all sorts of, signal verification and analyzation and all sorts of fun.
I'm not gonna lie. I know what the vector scope, the waveform, and the audio pages do on our Tektronix unit, and pretty much everything outside of that is all AJ. So,
my favorite one is
you have
as a video engineer, like as a video engineer, the eye pattern is one of my favorites because you can analyze, how close you are to getting signal dropouts. For sure. If the eye pattern normally looks kind of like an X, if it's all collapsed at the end of 300 feet, your cable's probably not,
I've seen AJ do that one before. What are some other things those devices do that are a bit more complex that someone like me wouldn't understand?
I mean, really, you kind of, it's at the end of the day, there's really only three signals. I mean, other than audio. So, you've got, everyone says YUV is kind of the old analog from what I understand. But you're looking at luma, you're looking at a blue value and a red value relative to each other, and that's, or RGB, depending on the signal. So really, that's all you're looking at. But it's just giving you different ways to visualize that, whether that's a waveform or a vector scope telling you where it sits in the chroma region, or lightning patterns, or that sort of thing. It's the same signal, so there's just different ways to monitor that. A favorite of mine is false color. If I'm shading, being able to preview on a joystick and look and see, you set flesh tone. You basically shade your flesh tone to being 60 IRE, and you set that to green or 70 IRE wherever it looks visually good, and then you can quickly bounce through a bunch of cameras and see, okay, the flesh tone's sitting at this level. And a lot of guys, they've been engineering so long, they can just look into a waveform and see people, but it takes a bit of an eyeball to do that.
Now, so that's your test equipment. What about like eye candy stuff? What is something that you've maybe seen go out on a Unreal Large tour? Maybe something that's not even gone out at all yet. That is just like 99%. It's like the Sony LED wall at NAB that they show off every single year.
Yeah, that was a really good looking one.
Yeah, so it's something like that that's probably not obtainable for the next 6 to 10 years, since I think I saw that 5 years ago and it's still not anywhere yet. What is that piece of equipment that you're like, it's not obtainable, but I want it?
That's a really good question. I mean, most of what I deal with and I like is attainable now. It's just cost, I'm a big fan of the higher end media servers, whether that's Disguise, Green Hippo, or others. AI is another great one. But really, I don't know. I've come to realize recently that just because it's the most expensive tool and this amazing thing doesn't mean it's the right tool for the job. So yeah, I don't really have a specific shiny object that I want right now. I'm sure in 6 months there will be something cool. But
so that's a really good point, though, is that sometimes things just work really well without having to be very expensive, right? I think you and I talked about
AJ. Cough AJ.
What do you mean there?
It's so funny going in from when we talk to AJ, and hopefully he's listening all the time. And AJ loves his shiny test equipment, and Simon's like, what I got will work, and what I have is obtainable.
Well, and it's a good point, though, because I think Simon, you and I have talked about before, is a product that was really targeted at houses of worship from Renewed Vision, which was Pro Video Player. And Pro Video Player is not an expensive media server, but it's really effective at what it does, right? I mean, it's for the price, it's kind of hard to beat.
Right. Yeah, I feel that way, about Resolume, and a couple others, PvP. AI is another good, very affordable one if you need some advanced feature sets. Whereas Disguise, you're looking at a very expensive media server, Hippo, you're looking at, a pretty expensive media server, they'll do the same thing, and they'll do things that others don't, automation tracking and whatnot. But if you're not doing a lot of that, or if you don't need that feature set, there's no reason to insist on, I have to have this shiny box, when box B will do it just as well.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that we're realizing too in the midst of isolation right now. And, we have people calling our company every single day asking us for helping their streaming solutions. And right now, one of the big things that we've been selling recently is one of the ATEM minis, from Blackmagic Design. Those aren't ideal for us by any means to sell, because they're basic switchers. I mean, they're literally just that. They're switchers, right? And they turn whatever your program output is from that unit into USB. So they're not great devices, but they work really, really well for what they're doing. I want to talk about it later in the show, but we recently made the transition for the Pro Production Podcast P3 here to vMix this last week, but we had been using OBS on a computer that was relatively inexpensive before this. I think that the entire show of what we're doing here on the podcast, originally week 1, started because we wanted to be able to provide a cheap and ineffective solutions for webcasting, and that started on my Microsoft Surface laptop with OBS running and my DSLR, the company's DSLR, hooked up through USB to or HDMI to USB. So I think that in many cases there's a lot to be said about using budget-friendly equipment that does the job, and if it does the job, that there's no real reason and benefit to jump to something that's just going to do the job but be much more expensive. What is something that maybe you're using, and I know what immediately is going to come up, but we'll see if it does. What is something that you're using on tour with these A-level artists doing arena, stadium gigs that you're going to find anywhere? Whether it be a small house of worship or corporate gigs, small concerts. What's something that you're using that you're going to find in those places that's working well for you and does the job?
Definitely like Pro Presenter is a good one. I use that for a lot of pre-show reels, and anytime I just need something to play clips, that same as Playback Pro, for similar usage. But the big one is like all our converters for the most part. I'm still using decimators and Blackmagic converters, and if I just need a cheap SDI monitor for a lighting guy to look at one of my feeds, and he doesn't need it to be broadcast quality, I'm just going to give him I'm going to give him a Dell monitor or a whatever monitor, and it's going to have a Blackmagic converter on it because it's it's the most cost-effective way to do it. So just because it's a big giant tour doesn't mean everyone's getting all these fancy tools and reusing it for everything. There's definitely usage for some of these smaller items and more affordable items in the big scale.
Yeah, that's so important to understand, and I think it's important to understand too that even your clients are on a budget, right? Very few clients are just sky's the limit, and go out and do anything that you want. Now, I think a lot of people would like to know, with the clients you've worked with, what are budget discussions like? Because that, for most people, including myself, I've never been in a discussion before where it's like, well, we're going to put on a great experience first and maybe budget second, or is that how it is? Is it budget driven?
Generally, that's generally not something I'm a part of. You use between vendors and management and whether that's corporate or whatever, since I'm not on the project management side doing corporate, that's generally something that's left to, people above my pay grade, as far as budget discussions go.
It's also above my pay grade, so that's probably why I asked it. I have a question here too. What makes a piece of equipment scalable into a huge system, and is something like that valuable into smaller systems?
Yeah, so as far as scalability, just the ability to either combine it or, anything. An Image Pro is scalable. It's a scaler as well, but it'll work as a switcher in a small corporate show, or you have 10 of them and you're using them for region of interest on different LED panels on a big award show. So pieces like that are definitely scalable. But in the media server world, there's there's media servers. A lot of companies have products that run the gamut from one output, and a couple of mixes to 6 4K outputs of unlimited mixes or massive timelines with automation control, but it's the same software, so you have a wide gamut. So as far as scalability goes there, you can learn the software at this level, but be in a good spot to be able to do these larger shows once you have enough experience.
Yeah. For me, it always goes back to devices that don't require you to buy twice, right? It's those devices that are going to serve you for multiple purposes. For me, the item I was talking about earlier that I said most people will have it sitting on their shelf was the Decimator, right? I think they're the MDLXs, right? The MDLXs that they convert from. I'm using one right here in the studio tonight. I'm taking in camera, HDMI from my camera, coming to my computer via SDI, and then spitting out SDI from my computer from my monitor in front of me so I can see the program, and I'm going then from SDI to HDMI, and I'm doing that all in the same box. But that's a unit that can be utilized anywhere within a production system, right? And they're one of those units that you want sitting on the shelf. At the end of the day, something like an HDMI, SDI, or scaler, routers, small routers, distribution amplifiers, those are the things that you want sitting on your shelf, right? So that when a piece of equipment inevitably fails, or you just want to switch something for the night, maybe it's a different configuration. Maybe you're walking into a house and they have some house screens or something that you want to connect to, but they're in a different resolution. Those are the things that you want sitting on the shelves. So Decimators
in a larger system.
What was that, Brady?
Go ahead, Simon.
No, so in a larger system, a lot of the times that function's done by, maybe an OpenGear card or something like an Image Pro or something a little more, whether it's interlacing or deinterlacing, something a little more advanced. But yeah, for the most part, if I'm just feeding some house screens and I'm out of cards, throw down a Decimator or something easy.
Yeah, for sure. I love the Decimators. The OpenGear. What OpenGear cards you're using?
Oh, a whole gamut. A lot. Mostly DAs, for sure. The HA5 4Ks, as I mentioned earlier, I use those in OpenGear format. For one, because I don't have to rewire things, and two, it's if I have one go bad, I yank the card out and slide it over.
But a lot of those OpenGear cards too are readily available to your average person, right? They're not crazy expensive cards.
No, there's pretty similar pricing with the throwdown box. The only difference is you got to buy several $1,000 enclosure, but it gives you redundant power supplies. They ride better in the racks. They're generally more rugged for sure.
How many backups do you have a backup for every piece of equipment when you're going out on tour, or is it just the big items? Do you have just a case full of Decimator MDLXs when you need them? Do you have redundant media servers? Do you have a secondary computer you carry with you at all times, especially when on tour?
Yeah, so that it really depends on the piece of equipment. Definitely media servers. Like in my media server rack currently, everything's redundant in some form or another. Whether it's 2 machines, 2 media servers, because if one locks up, you can go to the backup very quickly. Or backup power supplies for kind of the pinch points, whether that's matrices, routers, DAs, that sort of thing. Those work very well as redundant elements. But other things like switchers, you're looking at a several $100,000 switcher. A lot of times we don't carry backups, but those have redundant power supplies. So there's a certain amount of redundancy, and if your router dies, you can patch around it. If your switcher dies, you can patch around it. A lot of the racks that I toured with, everything's on the back panel, so if things go bad, you can literally, worst case scenario, take a camera feed that's been DA'd out of your CCU and go directly into your screens while you're sorting out everything else. So at least there's something up there.
So we're going to talk about it after the break, which is our unprofessional professional moment. But I want to know from you, Simon. It's the it's the cool moment of the show. One of my favorite moments. It's the rock star moment. So what has been a moment for you that you've just crush something out of the park, or maybe you did a show with someone, maybe it was even meeting someone, working with someone. What has kind of throughout your production experience been just a highlight of your moment or of your production life, where you've just felt great about something and walked away and just felt like something was, awesome?
Yeah, I mean, so like, really, kind of a lot of us in production say we're kind of gluttons for torture. We like putting ourselves in really difficult situations and staying up really late hours, doing putting on these giant shows in a really small amount of time, which is stressful in the time you're working on it. But when you finally get it done, that's for me is when I really feel most rewarded. So that's kind of my I always a Las Vegas show I just programmed back in January. It was pretty stressful programming period, but once we got the show done, it's an amazing looking show. And after the first show, you kind of live on this. You're kind of on this cloud of we did it. There's always notes and things to do, but the end result for me is when you've gotten this really big thing accomplished. That's kind of you feel like a rock star. You feel great. But in another sense of that, kind of the coolest thing I had the opportunity to do is I was on tour with Iron Maiden in 2016 when they had the 747. So I was able to fly on that a few times when we were in the States here. And so that was probably one of my definitely more cherished experiences.
Yeah, I would take riding on Iron Maiden 747 as a cool experience. So, hey, Simon Roberts is joining us. We're talking about video for video tonight. We're live on Facebook at facebook.com/Force Tech Solutions. And we're also live on YouTube without a link because we need more subscribers to get the permalink. But join us over there too. The link is in the Facebook page. We're taking your questions all night long on the Facebook page and on the YouTube page as well. Via phone, Simon's going to be answering live questions here. 317-284. Nope, that's not it. What is it?
317-586-2844.
317-586-2844. We're taking your questions right now. We're going to hit a quick break, but after the break, it's actually my favorite part of the show, which is going to be the professionally unprofessional moment. That's going to be Simon's oh crap moment. We're going to hear from Simon after the break. He's going to be talking about that. Who knows? Maybe Brady and I have been teasing. Maybe we'll share ours tonight too. But we're taking your questions after this. After the break too, we're going back with the unprofessionally professional moment. You're watching P3. It's the Pro Production Podcast. Well, welcome back in. Again, it's great to have you all for the second part of the show. I am the host of the P3 Pro Production Podcast that we've got going on here. And it's great to have you tonight. We're talking about video for video. We've got Simon Roberts with us, who is our guest tonight. Simon has worked with artists like Keith Urban, Lady Antebellum, and many others. It's great to have Simon with us too. And one thing that I've been really excited for is talking about our biggest blunders. But before I get to our biggest blunders for Simon, Brady, you and I have been for weeks talking about our biggest blunders, and we haven't talked about them yet. Like usual, yeah. I throw these questions out to you without any preparation, so you have to answer on the spot, but that's the best kind of answer. What's been your biggest production blunder?
This is a fun one. It was 2016, I believe. I was out doing little tours, kind of around the Midwest, with a local country duo here out of Muncie called Cook and Bell. If you've not heard of them, they're a phenomenal group, sound really great. They are super fun on stage. And this was like my third time out with them, so it's just starting to develop the relationship. They're just starting to trust me, and I'm A1 wanting for it. And, it's small town. I'm the one setting up. I'm unloading the trailer, packing up, flying speakers. I'm the guy, as a lot of people have been. We're out in Illinois. Beautiful, sunny summer day in July. Super hot. It was some fair festival we're at, and got everything set up, got line tested, got ready to go for sound check, and out of absolutely nowhere, a rain cloud comes and just dumps, inches of rain. And I'm out there with a Yamaha LS9, and I do not have a tent. So the LS9 just gets soaked.
The good news is they're unbreakable, so it probably continued to work.
Well, I could see that power was on. The screen kept coming up and going out, up and out, and you could tell that something was happening. So I start talking to some locals, and I found out there's a local church nearby, and I'm about to just go rip out this analog mixer of this church just to get some audio going. So I'm out there looking at the analog. I'm like, I can't do that. I run back to the LS9. Still nothing's happening. And what I try to do is, if you guys remember the LS9 or the Yamaha LS9, or if you haven't been on one, it wasn't touchscreen. You went through with all the buttons. Nick, I'm sure you remember you worked on some of those older Yamaha consoles as well, where you just went through menus and menus and menus.
Yes, at least they were really clicky. So when you hit them, like it was at least a satisfying click, and when you can click again.
So I continue to click through menus from muscle memory to get an iPad set up, because I didn't have an iPad set up. I didn't need one for this show. So muscle memory, I get my iPad connected to this thing, and somehow, for the love of God, my iPad connects, and we go on 2 minutes before the show, no sound check, and just run with it.
So
and
now what everyone wants to know is, did you kill the LS9?
The LS9 is still alive. I talked to, it was a local rental house, Quest Audio out in Anderson, who I was working for. The LS9 is still alive. It is still being used. A few weeks after dry out, that thing is it's rock solid, like nothing ever touched it.
You just can't kill the consoles.
You can't, and they're great consoles. I love Yamaha consoles, and I'll be a Yamaha fanboy, I think, forever because of this story. But you just can't kill them. To cap off the night, our tour bus got stuck in about 6 inches of mud that night. So we just sit there for about 12 hours before a tow truck can come pull us out of the mud. And that was a very, very late night.
Woof. Yeah, I can imagine. All right. Do I go now or do I go next week?
No, you threw me under the bus and didn't tell me, so I want to hear your story.
Okay.
This week.
All right. My professionally unprofessional story. It involves me working at a venue, and we had recently purchased.
Can you say what venue?
No, I
okay.
can't. But we had recently purchased it was a Midas Pro 2. They had just come out. And the Midas Pro 2s, we had like serial number 6. And so really, really new Midas console. We had been saving up for it and purchased it. And this was when I was 19. And so we got the console in. Works great for us. Love the console to this day. Love the way it sounds. And the Midas console, at that point in time, they were releasing lots of new software updates for it because it's a newer console. So they were, just got the basic console out and then started releasing some new software updates. So like a good boy, I was updating the software very frequently because that's what you're supposed to do, right? When new software comes out, you update. And right before a large performance, I updated the console, and to myself, this is what I thought. I thought to myself, well, I updated the console, so, when consoles break, when stuff breaks is when it gets rebooted, right? When you turn it back on, that's when it crashes, or when you turn it off, that's when it crashes. If you've ever shut down or started up a Midas console, there's a shutdown and a startup sequence to them. If you have multiple consoles, there's a large process of turning them off and shutting them down, or turning them on and shutting them down.
Not the H3000.
I don't have any experience with the H3000 yet, but this was my experience with the Pro 2. So I made the decision that I was going to leave before the show on 24 to 36 hours. I was just going to leave the console on, turn the screens all the way down, left the console on. And that's what got me, you see, because we were in the middle of the first show, and there was a spoken word part, and the spoken word part was going great until I realized that all of a sudden the meters and the screen and everything was all of a sudden kind of locking up and lagging. And I thought to myself, that's interesting with 2,000 people sitting in the room. And, I started to try to change some pages on the console and realized that things were going very bad very quickly. Now, we were still passing audio, so no one knew at this point in time. But I kind of started experimenting with what I could mute and unmute or advance in my automation. And I realized that the console was going to lock up, and we were not going to be able to move on to our next scene. So at this point in time, I make the call back to the stage manager and say, hey, I'm not going to be able to mute this microphone, and I'm not going to be able to unmute the other microphones to move on to the end of the show. So we're going to have to do something. So there was a musical act at the end of the show. They then proceeded to walk out onto the stage and play acoustically the last song. Like 11 people, they just had an acoustic guitar and they just sang the song a cappella. And to this day, I swear there are hundreds of people that have no idea that part of the show was not planned. So as bad as it could have been, it ended up turning out pretty okay.
And I'm sure a ton of people loved it and thought that was the coolest thing ever for this band to come out.
Yes.
The best way to end the show.
Yes. That is the truth too. They had email after email telling how much they loved the end of the show, and it was their favorite part. And to this day, they continue to do that show every year, and they don't do it anymore. But I think for the next 2 years after that, they actually closed the show in that way. So it was neat. But Simon, you probably have a better story than that. Simon, what's your big blunder? What is your professionally unprofessional moment?
I mean, it wasn't. I don't want to use the word blunder, but it was definitely very frightening. We were starting a tour, Australian leg of a tour a couple years ago. We were in Newcastle, New South Wales, and I mean, we'd just been fighting with lots of things. So we were a U.S. tour coming down there. I don't know if everyone knows. So we have 60 cycle power here. They have 50 cycle power. So we kept our system in 60, and we're fighting flickering, all sorts of fun issues. So on top of that, integrating with a new system, partially into our system we've been carrying, everything was going fine. Some weirdness here and there, just due to power and different signal runs than normal. But so come to the first show. We load the first cue. Artist is ready to walk out on stage. They're either behind the video wall, about to duck under, and the first cue of the show was this kind of spiral thing behind the artist on the video wall as they popped up and stood on a riser and sang first song of the show. And so we load the first cue, but so the unique thing about that song, it was all generated real time. It wasn't pre-rendered content. And so we fire the first cue, which normally I would do, with the lighting director, we would do it a little bit beforehand in case there was something funky, but we hadn't had any issues, so we loaded the cue. As the artist is getting ready to go on stage, production manager's already made the call. All right, guys, get ready for show. Here we go. And then lighting director hits go. Both of my servers crash and die. They were Hippos, and it was not Hippo's fault. It was our fault. But so what happened was they both went red. Normally they're green good, red bad. Both of the engines had crashed. I tried restarting engines, didn't work. I had to restart both servers, and was still having issues, like running it, between 45, kind of doing this tachycardic thing between 45 and like 20 frames a second, which was bizarre. I'd never seen it, and both machines were doing it, and they were not identical machines. They were configured the same, but one was a Taiga, which is the kind of the flagship Hippo, and the other was a Montaigne, which was our unit, which was the flagship for doing real time. And so we figured out what had happened the next day. So during the show, I was literally having to turn off DMX control every time a cue was fired, turn it on and toggle it back off while the show went on. So it basically ended up being a fully manual show for me, taking every single time there's a cue. As it turned out, when the opening act had loaded their show file onto the consoles, it was spitting out bad ArtNet values in the range our servers were sitting in. So it was telling it to do something weird, and that didn't clear out when we loaded our show. So it took 2 days to figure that out. I figured it out on the second day, but it was still the most bizarre thing I've ever had happen. And the time being, kind of the Band-Aid fix was to manually toggle off and on control over and over again during the show. And at the end of the day, the audience was none the wiser. It was running as if a show should have. There was just a little hiccup every once in a while in video, which happens anyway sometimes when media servers get bogged down. But yeah, this was definitely a human error thing that we all figured out later on. But no one could have possibly known about. That was kind of the crazy thing.
I think it's funny you mentioned the human error part, and 99% of the time, I think the human error is always and I think as professional production guys, we always want to be, oh no, the server was bogged down, or I know like on the Midas consoles, the mute button is right next to the selection. So I always want to blame that when I mute something on accident, which has happened once, and I fixed it really quick. So hopefully no one noticed, but there's that human element that after a lot of sleepless nights, man, there's always the human element to play into. And at the end of the day, these, as perfect as these shows go in production, we want it to be, there's always a human element as part of it.
It's still live. It's a live event. It's not, if we had time to go back and edit and fix everything that, would you just watch a pre-made television show or pre-taped concert. But even those have errors that you go back later and correct. So
yeah, I think that's what drew me to production in my early stages of my youth was we have to fix whatever's going wrong quickly. Because there's always something to go wrong, no matter how much planning, and we still have to pull off a phenomenal show. And that feeling after a show, especially when something goes wrong and we still pulled it off, to me is like the best high, the best feeling, the best, man, we came together as a team and did this that I've ever felt.
Yeah, definitely. No, and that kind of goes back to what I said earlier. Kind of that rock star moment for me is always, if something goes wrong, or if it's just a very challenging rehearsals and show, as a lot of people would say, that first beer tastes really good after that, or that celebration, walk outside, that's for me is like you've been in this venue all day, all week rehearsing, and then after that first show, you just take a walk outside, and it's either really hot or it's really cold, and it's just this feeling of kind of washing away the craziness that has been that day prior.
So here's what I want to know, though, is all about, I want to know about the most jank thing. So when I mean jank, I mean MacGyvered thing you've done. So talking about ways that things just work, what have you done that's MacGyvered?
I mean, I've definitely, a lot of time, I've had to bypass like backplanes on pieces of equipment and go most media servers are computers basically, but I've had the piece of equipment in the backplane and what's actually connected to the motherboard or GPU, that gets a little funky. So I've definitely had to open up machines inside of racks and fish down HDMI or DP cables right into graphics cards, which support has told me to do, but that's always, then you got kind of this you've got panels hanging off the back, you've got cables sticking in. It makes it work for the show, but you don't want it bouncing down the road like that, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that seems about right. Now, when you're taking off the back planes, how are you? When you say back planes, I mean, are you taking off? I'm thinking of back plane like an open gear converter, or an open gear. Like, what does that mean? Because how do you hook up?
Gotcha. So there's actually this is Green Hippo specific. So there's actually a space between the back of the motherboard and cards and the actual back of the case, where there's some cable routing and some pass-throughs on the back, or like little DVI or DisplayPort reclockers, and that sort of thing. So I've had to pull off the back panel where there's XLR and whatnot. I've had to pull off those little pieces and route directly into things when the bit in between's not working correctly.
Simon, AJ has a really good question. I hopefully he's still listening. Mac or PC? That's all he said. I grew up. My dad's an IT guy, so I grew up in a world of PC. Mac, you would never ever use a Mac. Macs were for people who didn't know how to use computers. But then in 2013, I bought a MacBook
They still are.
Pro and loved it. And then I've not purchased one since. Unfortunately, there's a lot of applications that are Mac only or will run better on Mac. So that was kind of the thing at the time. The best thing Apple had going for them for a long time, in my opinion, was the design. I've got my MacBook right here. So you've got a thin unibody metal design, and it's beautiful,
Are those
shiny.
ports on the side?
Yes, this is free
Surely
dongle.
Surely there's not a network board on that, is there?
No, there's not. I thought you still have to use a dongle for that. But I love the thin, light. They're still pretty uncontested for battery life in a lot of places. Yeah, they're great looking machines. But then things like the Microsoft Surface came out. Things like I personally use. I'm a big fan of Razer. I'm a big fan of Lenovo, but they're still kind of that chunky PC. And so you get a lot of plastic. You get kind of a thick bottom.
Yo, you are about
the ones that I use.
You are about to offend our owner big time.
AJ just bought a
is
Lenovo.
probably
Does he not like
What,
Lenovo?
AJ?
He can connect to the call
he
at
likes
any point in
Lenovo.
time. His
loves them.
Lenovo is his baby. Yeah.
Oh no! I love Lenovo too. No, but it depends what I'm doing. If it's my daily use machine, I want something that's a little thinner and kind of a metal unibody that just looks sleek. And Lenovo makes those, and so do all these other manufacturers. But I ended up buying a Razer for that purpose. But I've looked at some, like, was it the P53? And those are rugged business machines, workstations, and it's got a Quadro RTX 6000 in it in a laptop machine, and those are a lot more clunky. So I guess the ones that I've looked into buying are a little more clunky than most laptops.
Here's the thing.
I'm pretty sure you could have run over AJ's with his truck.
Yes.
And still be fine.
It's either a laptop
Right,
or it's a desktop. And that's the issue. It's like sometimes some of these laptops you get so big now, they're basically just desktops in laptop form, which you might as well just go buy a desktop, folks. They're so much cheaper. But I've got a Surface and I love it. So, this entire show is produced on PC. Just saying.
I like the wink.
Hey, thanks. I want to get us into another question. This is something that I don't understand very well. So this question only comes from, I guess, from what I think people would ask, but also what I'm going to ask as well, which is this show automation. Show automation is very. I don't know. When I was starting out doing production, and even now when I'm doing production, I don't have a great grasp on show automation. I've used it in the past, but obviously what night to night these large scale arena stadium tours are doing with show automation is huge, right? You're integrating things like video, audio, automation in the form of rigging automation, pyrotechnics, different. Everything is obviously automated to some level, maybe with some safeties in place. But tell me about automation on a really large scale. How much of it is automated, how much is not, and what type of systems you're actually using to do that automation?
I mean, it really depends on the show. Shows that are run primarily pop and kind of more pop country artists and some of the more pop rock and roll. They play along with like a click, like most bands do now. They play along with the click and time code. So our consoles receive time code. Media servers receive time code. Sometimes, I mean, I've met bands and backline guys that are using it to do pedal changes. I mean, like within the song. So it's sometimes, a lot of those things, time code is king. That's generally LTC in the form of an audio signal. Sometimes it's MIDI time code, generally not. Just because of the distances involved. I found it better to use LTC. But time code, and whether that's generally like automation and pyro for the most part, even if they're queuing off of time code, the guys that I know don't program or have it trigger via time code, even if it can, just because from what they've said, it kind of takes their attention away from it being something that an intended action, as opposed to like just having to watch for e-stops. So they'll maybe watch a time code clock and know, okay, at 8 hours, 26 minutes, 9 seconds, and 30 or 13 frames is my cue to go, bring this position down. So they're reacting to time code or watching time code, but also, if there's someone standing in the way pyro, they don't fire, or they don't move automation. Not necessarily.
And there's automation within automation too, right? Where it's from what I've worked with rigging automation it's there's something that triggers a series of automation, right? So it can be, if you are chasing time code and a time code triggers a rigging action, then that triggers multiple rigging actions within a script. It's not like, I guess that's what I've worked with too. So, most rigging and pyro that I've worked with too, obviously, are either time coded with a dead man, some type of safety or something that actually activates those systems, or it's manually triggered as well. Tell me though about beyond lighting. Lighting's the big one, and video are the two big ones we think of with automation, right? Those are things that are ran a lot by the automation and chasing time code. Tell me though about in your experience, are there things that touch audio? Are there things that touch things that we might not ever even think of that follow time code or follow automation within a system? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of EDM acts will use like signals off of CDJs or other signals. Generally, audio is generating it because that's kind of that's the main point of a concert, right? I mean, no one goes home hunting lights. As a lighting video guy, it's people are there for the sound, and they're there for the experience. But sound always takes precedence. I've oftentimes gone home not being able to see because the lights were in my face the entire time. So, that's a memorable experience.
Okay, boomer.
All right, okay. Now listen here, okay? When the lights are doing nothing but strobing your eyes the entire time, it can be better, okay?
You're getting old. That's what
I'm not.
Enjoy the concert.
I'm not. But I have noticed lately that concerts are too loud, so just saying.
God.
I mean, 104 is the limit in most places, so
what is it?
But 104 is pretty loud. 104.
Oh yeah,
decibels.
Yeah, I'm more in like the 80. Is the limit. I'm more in like the 84, 85 range. I'd like it to peak at. So
that is such bull.
Okay, so on the automation side of things, what drives all of this? Is it Ableton? Like, is there an Ableton computer on stage that drives 100% of the automation? And if the Ableton computer crashes, screw the show.
It really depends on. Depends on what act or what the event is. Definitely we're talking kind of concert touring here. Corporate, it's kind of the opposite. Media servers a lot of time will drive a lot of other things and spit out time code and playback tracks because you kind of want a central queuing point. But as far as like concert tours, Ableton or Pro Tools or whatever your playback rig. Generally there's an AB switch. They've got two laptops. One of the guys I work with, people talk about like maybe running it over network. Time code sync or running, Dante Trax rig or whatever. But the way this guy uses it, he couldn't do that because he's actively interacting with the music. Okay, the artist decides to vamp this. Well, he's on his B machine. He is previewing and listening and kind of jogging around and figuring out where he needs to jump in. And then at that point, he's like a DJ would crossfade. He switches to the other machine. And with the seamless switchers, audio switchers, AB switches, you can't tell that he's gone to another machine. But timecode may jump. So we set our media servers to lock to timecode, our lighting consoles to jump if it sees a jump. So it's musically making sense as long as the time code's in time. And if time code fails, you just do it. You just run a show manually, like you always have. But
run it live.
This is a big one too. It's not just locking to time code or firing from time code. It's syncing to time code too, right? It's following time code so that things remain in sync. Is that common? So that things, because obviously things can drift. Now, granted, if you're doing multiple sequences or multiple triggers from a time code, they're not going to drift that much. But are they following time code, or are they just triggering?
Right. So at least in the media server sense, there's both. We'll use Disguise for an example. So you can set time code triggers for events to happen at certain time code. You put in a tag on the timeline. You say this is the time this needs to happen. And then suddenly you look at the time display on your timeline and it starts there. That's a trigger, and it'll still track if it jumps around. But then you can also not do that, and you could set you can lock the actual clip to code. And other media servers are that way too. Hippo generally, I'm programming on a media server, so that's the thing firing the cues. So it can look for time code triggers or not. But then generally I have you take a song where there's a virtual duet. It's an artist, your artist singing, and they've recorded an album, and they sing along with this person, and they want this person on screen. Well, that's important for it to be locked then, not just triggered. Generally there's like one cue. Play the video, and then it fades up, and then it moves around. But you want it to lock with that audio track because when the artist jumps in and starts singing, the virtual artist, you want that lip sync to be on, and it has to. One of the artists I work for is very particular about that. So, that's a very important instance to have it locked. But a lot of times, if it's not something that was built around the music, if it's just kind of a generic clip, you don't necessarily need it. Or if it's a loop, you don't need it to lock to code.
Well, and that's a premium feature too, right? Locking to time code, following time code specifically, is something that is a premium feature of most applications, but whether it be a media server or even lighting consoles, like locking and not just playing back a series of events is a premium feature.
It really depends. Like something like Resolume, they don't allow triggering via timecode, but they will lock to timecode. Whereas I believe Pro Presenter or Pro Video Player will trigger via timecode, but it doesn't necessarily lock. So it really depends on, kind of what software you're using. But most high-end solutions will have both.
Simon, with all the pre-work and all of the rehearsal and everything you guys do prior to a tour, getting time code in sync between audio, video, lighting, everybody going, once you get on tour and everything's set up, how much stuff are you guys doing live? Or at that point, are you hit and play and trusting in your programming?
Yeah, so it depends. I like a mix of both if I can. So you kind of get your base programming down. You get your, the clip that the editors and content creators have made to the music. But then there's always, it's still live people playing on stage. And if it's a band that actually, will kind of riff and do things, or there's guitar solos or there's drum solos or whatever, those are manual buttons for me. So a lot of times, I go back to D3 as an example on this one, just because it's one of the more popular ones now. So on the timeline, I'll have my clip playing, right? That's bespoke for this piece. That whether that's an artist duet, whether it's just a piece of content that runs the whole length and is sequenced to music, that I'll do as a timeline. And then the other stuff I'll do from a lighting console control, whether that's like flashes or strobes or little kind of wipes here and there, or whatever color effect, or just some generic things. If they throw up a song that's not we don't have coded, I can hit a button on my console and go to a punt page and have some generic content or some generic IMAG looks or whatever. So that stuff I'll do from the console. So it's a kind of a mix of both. And for the most part, you are never going to be able to get away with just having everything pre-programmed. And people who think that is don't have bailouts. You need to have some sort of bailout at the end of the day, whether that's triggered via a lighting console, a surface that you have there, or you just know where those queues are in the server or playback device. You just need to have bailouts that aren't triggered externally, I think.
I want to talk about redundancies, but before I talk about redundancies, I want to real quick just mention it. We have 25 minutes left in the show. Again, we're taking your questions, 317-586-2844, I think is the number. We're taking them via Facebook and YouTube as well, facebook.com/Force Tech Solutions, our YouTube page. Once again, hit subscribe so we can get that permalink, please. We're taking questions, and you can ask Simon questions. It's free help, right, Simon? Is it free? Is that what we're doing tonight? And none of this is cost any money?
Yeah, I was under that impression. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
Am I getting? I thought I was paying to be on the show.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Our guests are paying us to be on the show. That's our source of revenue during the lockdown here. But
we'll send you an invoice.
Yeah, seriously. But no, you can ask Simon questions from Simon's flowing hair to why his webcam quality is absolutely so poor, to what types of drinks and food Simon likes the most. And you can ask Brady and I questions if you would want to, but I don't know why you would want to. But again, Facebook, YouTube, phone number 317-586-2844. That's how you can get a hold of us, ask your questions live on air, or even share what cool things you're doing as well. Simon, I want to talk about redundancies, though. And redundancies, let's make this fun. What things do you have redundancies for? And then what is the one thing that you don't have redundancy for that if it fails, people are going to go home from a show very prematurely and upset?
Gotcha. I think this is actually redundant as we covered this earlier, but So
tell me about automatic redundancies.
Yeah. So definitely like backup power supplies, having redundant power supplies for things, having just two media servers or spare monitors or whatever. So generally in a media server system, if we're just talking that, I'll have two media servers active that are identical, that both feed into a matrix that has redundant power supplies. So really, the matrix or whatever your router is or whatever is going to be the biggest, kind of your biggest bottleneck. So if that goes bad, you're patching around some stuff. But generally, everything has a redundant power supply. Generally, you put things on different power sources. So machine A and machine B should not be on the same leg of power or the same UPS. You kind of want the ability, whether that's automatic failover in the case of some servers or it's manual failover. You still want to be able to, hit a preset and go to the next, go to the other one pretty quickly.
Are there some things that and granted, this is in all production setups, are there some things that would really take a lot longer to switch over than others, or to workarounds that if they happened in the middle of a show, you would have to stop the show and actually switch those? And have you talked through those procedures, as to if X failed, what would we do? Are those things that are kind of documented?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So when switcher goes bad, that's a big one. That's, you're usually firing off a salvo and just sending a camera somewhere. A lot of directors are like, I need to be able to punch. I'm like, if it's just one camera for 20 minutes, or not, hopefully not 20 minutes, 5 minutes while you, suss things out, at least there's something up there.
I talk about that too.
Really when you say what the director wants.
When you say firing off a salvo, you're talking about firing off of the router, right? Triggering a salvo in the router.
So on a router, or that routes multiple things. It bypasses, you have a few different ones that do different things. Media server failover, you have, you just have kind of salvos for a few different worst case scenarios that bypass various pieces. And if your router dies, that's a whole other thing. You got to physically patch around, various systems.
Are you integrating physical patch panels into systems still so that you can patch around, or what does that process look like?
It really depends. So the systems, some of the systems that are out there from some vendors, everything's on the back patch panel, which is great. You can patch around everything. The downside of that is there's a lot of patching to do every day. So you're patching from a VTR rack to your system rack, and your system rack to your engineer bridge and your director's bridge. Like on I think on that tour I had 200 something just SDI patches in video mix, plus another couple hundred throughout the venue for various things.
So now that all of this, obviously live event production has been a staple of what we all do, as well as what many do. Tell me about what are the creative things that people are thinking through now in the current situation we're in with coronavirus and essentially live events being shut down. What are things that you're seeing within the industry of things might move a certain direction? What do you think is going to happen with this next stage of live production, especially as we're getting ready to enter into prime festival and tour season?
Yeah, that's definitely up to people who are much more educated than me, much more intelligent than me. The leaders of healthcare organizations and people in our government. Really, that's not for us to decide. Kind of the biggest thing is how do we work around that? So, a lot of people are thinking, hopefully, that, everything's back to normal in June, which I hope so. But, we're all thinking of, okay, what's plan B? What can we do, some higher quality live streams, maybe we get to a point where it's okay to have a small crew and do like a full show, lights, sound, video, but there's no audience just because we can't. So that's the sort of thing we're all looking into. I'm working with a company that I'm a part of. We're doing some smaller live streams of bands here in Nashville that really, that people are used to seeing in smaller clubs and venues around town, and kind of indie stuff. But that they have nowhere to perform. So we're looking at rolling some of that stuff out. But yeah, it's definitely I think it's going to be changed for a while. A lot of the experts are saying until we have a vaccine, really, we can't go back to these giant festivals and things like we used to, which is unfortunate, but it's kind of our new reality. So it's how can we reach, the biggest audience and kind of as everyone says, the new normal, whether that's video or that's, just smaller production.
Now you're in Nashville. You're from Indianapolis, but you're in Nashville now. Tell me, what is the feeling around Nashville? I mean, a city that primarily, a lot of Nashville focuses on tourism and the music industry, which is now, both of those industries have been severely impacted by this. What is the feeling there now, and how are things proceeding?
Yeah, so we kind of got hit with a double whammy here. We had actually my neighborhood and neighborhood across the river, pretty big large part of Nashville, downtown Nashville, got hit with a tornado that wiped out power and destroyed hundreds of homes and displaced people, and people lost their lives. And then it took out even more people out in Mount Juliet and surrounding counties, and just kind of went on, got bigger as it went out. So we were hit pretty hard with that. I drive around my neighborhood, and there's downed trees everywhere still. There's condemned buildings. Restaurants that I've been to that gone. It's a pile of rubble now. So we got hit with that, and then we got hit with everyone's sheltering in place and doing the best we can. It's definitely weird. A lot of businesses are closing. A lot of restaurants are starting to cut back their hours and people. People are hopeful. I mean, Nashville's always kind of I wasn't here then. There was a big flood in 2011 that displaced a lot of people and caused a lot of havoc. And they call it the volunteer state, and a lot of people are very eager to get out and help. But that's definitely been harder to do with the self-isolation going on.
What personally are you looking forward to doing once this all is over? I mean, is it touring? Is it going back out on the road? Is it something else?
I just love travel. in general. I mean, whether it's for work or for pleasure. I love travel. I spent like 2 weeks after a European tour last, like hung out in Prague and Paris and London, just kind of by myself and walked around and stayed in Airbnbs. So that was great. I really miss that. I miss airports. I miss flying. So I really, a lot of people hate airports and flying, but I kind of, since I did it so much, that's something I actually enjoy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you. It's amazing, I think, what we're currently missing out of our day-to-day lives that we would have never expected that we would miss, right? And
my wife.
Your wife?
My wife has started. My wife has started.
You led that off really bad there and just said my wife. You're missing your wife. I'm like, Brady, she's home with you.
I haven't seen her in months. Well, I'm locked in here working all day. With
your bunny.
I've had some phenomenal time with my bunny. My wife has started, and it's a very large mason jar. So if you're going to do this, get a large mason jar at home. And every time we think of something that we miss or that we took for granted or something we want to do, as soon as this is over, we write it down, we put it in the jar, and once all this is over, we're just going to take one of those every few days. And one today was like, just go out for good sushi. I miss just going out for good sushi and just sitting down and having a meal at a sushi bar.
This is not necessary to say on this show, but as soon as this is all over, and hopefully it will be over, is that go out and support local restaurants, local bars, local anything local, because they're going to need support. And I think for us, local music venues. Any local entertainment. I mean, that's really what our industry is. When someone asks me what I do, and I don't want to explain to them that I design high-scale audiovisual lighting broadcast systems for a living, I say, I work in the entertainment industry. What we do is we essentially provide entertainment. Most of the services we provide at the end of the day are entertainment-based services. So, it's going to need a lot of support at the end of this, the entertainment industry, from concert venues to bars to restaurants. They're going to need a lot of support. So that's really good. Simon, last time we talked to you, we were talking about, the tornado recently. At that point in time had not just recently it happened. I think just 2 or 3 weeks before we had talked to you last. So hopefully everything is getting better. Obviously there's a large roadblock in the way with coronavirus, but hopefully things are getting better. And things are kind of getting back to as normal as they can be right now for the people in Nashville. So, I want to talk about next week real quick. Next week we have Brett Goodrich on. Brett Goodrich is a graphic designer. We're going to be talking about graphics for video. It's going to end our 4-week series on live streaming. First week on, we had AJ on. AJ talked to us about doing audio for video and had one of the most ridiculous tutorials ever, with multiple cameras and crazy things set up from my house to our headquarters and Brady's house, and we did all of that in about 2 days, and I lost majority of my hair, as you can see, from doing that. Last week we talked to Dusty Harrison, the lighting director for NBA Tuesdays on TNT. Great talking about lighting for video. This week we're with Simon Roberts. Simon's talking about video for video. We've had a great night with Simon. Next week talking to Brett Goodrich about graphics for video. So you can catch all of this. It's on demand on our YouTube page and on our Facebook page as well. And if you have questions, we've given those guys, we've given their emails, their Instagrams, Twitters out, but if you can't get a hold of them specifically, you can get a hold of us by emailing info@force.tech, and we can get you in contact with them or help you resolve your questions as well. So super excited about that. Next week with Brett coming on. And then after that, we're going to do what we call the Mega Show. It's going to be a recap of the 4 weeks. It's going to be our most interactive show ever. We're super excited for it, but next week ends our 4-week series on live streaming, which is the hot topic right now, right guys? I mean, live streaming is kind of the way that everything's going, as you see multiple live streaming services crashing every single week because of the demand on them. Facebook and YouTube integrating new features as well to make their systems and platforms more stable. So, it's been good talking about live streaming.
I think there's some good that's came out of this, which is the live streaming and how it's a lot more comfortable now with just the average person jumping on and maybe playing an acoustic or jumping on. The coolest thing ever, it was a guy in the middle of the woods. He was dressed head to toe in a Sasquatch outfit playing the saxophone, and he called himself the Sax Squatch. And he played phenomenal jazz live streaming. Content like that may never have reached the general public without COVID. So there's some good that came out of it. The Sax Squatch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and people are becoming more aware of how to live stream, how to use this technology. And at the end of the day, I think one of the things that we've talked about is that it's not necessarily about the technology behind the live stream. It's about the content behind the live stream. Ultimately, if this podcast, if it never receives many views, it's not because the technology didn't look good or the graphics or the video or whatever didn't look good. It's because of the content behind it. And I think that's the most important thing too, is to realize that content is key in these situations. Whether you're a house of worship, you're a local concert venue that's streaming your concerts, you're a business that's streaming, seminars on what you're doing at your business. The reality of it is, it's all about the content that you're providing, and that people at the end of the day will tune in to watch great content with bad video quality. And they'll be willing to forgive and accept that, but they won't be able and willing to watch crap content with great video quality. So that's super important. Is it's all about the content at the end of the day, right? I want to go around the horn now, and this week we're going to start with none other than Brady, because we always do, and throw him under the bus as well for the recap session.
Ready for it.
No, you weren't. I'm going to have to start doing something
about what I want to do.
I'm going to trick you next week to where you can't do it. But
what are you going to do? Start with you?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the issue, is I don't know. But we're gonna do our recap here. Brady, recap tonight. Tell me your favorite parts about tonight, and yeah, what really stood out to you.
Yeah, first, Simon, thanks for coming on, spending 2 hours with us, just hanging, talking your world and what you do and what you love to do. I love talking about the redundancies behind your system, as weird as it sounds. Redundancies always intrigue me because it's something a lot of people don't think about, that there's always backups and sometimes backups to your backup. So I love talking through your specific system, how you're routing your redundancies and how you're doing it. So.
Well, that was short.
Yeah, sorry. I noticed you weren't ready.
If you're going to think about it, then you should have at least talked for longer.
And also, I was excited to hear whatever mint bitter drink whenever we're all out in Vegas again. Simon, I'll go to town on those. So,
well, yeah, you don't have to wait till Vegas. I can mail you a bottle.
Oh my.
Well, I don't know about the laws in Indiana, but we can arrange for a bottle to be dropped off at your.
Listen, I don't think anyone ever. Okay, it's called. What is it called again? I'm going to butcher the name, so I'm not going to say it.
I thought it was a mixed drink.
No, it's
Fernet Branca.
Fernet Blanca.
Fernet Branca.
Okay.
Branca, Branca.
Branca, Fernet Branca. So it's not something that anyone would go to town on, first off, and it's disgusting, second off. So that covers that. Simon, again, thank you for being on. What do you want to summarize tonight with? What is the thing that stood out to you the most, or that you want to get across to people?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing, especially with all these podcasts that you guys have been doing, is just that, we're facing kind of a truly bizarre thing, and how we can address that with technology is definitely, it's going to open new doors, close others, but it's leading to a lot of innovation in all aspects: video, lighting, audio. It's definitely a driving force behind a lot of innovation going on.
It is. And, not to get corny here, but one thing about this interesting situation that we're in, that I, like many of the people that are watching and you guys, never predicted was that in some time in our lifetime, we would go through a situation like this. But throughout it all, it is driving creativity and it's driving different solutions. And typically out of things like this, we see great strides of improvement of, quality of life, and, also new conveniences that we have. I was walking through Meijer the other day and noticed that all of the cashiers now have face guards over them. They've got big plexiglass guards over them. And I thought to myself, I'm always going to remember in 20 or 30 years when we're taking our kids to the grocery store with us, I'm always going to remember when face guards in the United States, but in front of a cashier, become a thing. And just like that, when online streaming really became a thing, right? Because that's the new big thing. So yeah, throughout all of this, I think that there's a lot of progressive things that have happened that we're going to directly attribute to an improvement in life quality, to something horrible of what's happening now, but ultimately it's going to pave ways for good technological advancements and medical advancements in the future, right? So yeah. That's the encouraging way to look at things. So, with all that being said, guys, thank you for being here tonight, Simon, Brady. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We're going to keep doing this thing, and as far as the production of things, tonight was our best show, I think, in terms of it was smooth, it flowed, the technology
cut out.
Your video didn't cut out. We didn't have technical issues tonight. We've been
brought to you by vMix call.
It is. Yeah. This is the first night we've used vMix, and we've used OBS in the past, and it's worked really well for us, but we kind of got to the point where we needed a little bit more horsepower, and vMix has worked really well for us tonight. I plan on, during the Megan show, I think by that time I'll have all of this really down as to how we're using ProPresenter and how we're using vMix and an X32 and DSLR and capture cards. I think I'll have all of that down by then, and I'll be able to do kind of a release on how we're doing our show here, because people have been interested in how we're doing it. But it went really well tonight, so I'm happy about vMix. Happy it all worked.
And guys, if you're listening right now, and you've been watching the last few weeks, let us know what you've liked, what you'd like to see in the future. We are always trying to brainstorm more content, who we want to have on next, different topics that we want to cover. And that would be really helpful for you guys to email in, message in, call in, and just say, hey, I want to learn more about this. Can you schedule this? Or if you guys have ideas of what we can cover next, let us know. Hit a like or hit a comment on YouTube or in Facebook, and we'll definitely take it into consideration for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the entire point of this. It started out as a show that talked about live streaming to help people with their live streaming setups. We did it 5 days in a row for the live streaming episodes, and now it's kind of going beyond that. So guys, again, thank you for being on tonight. Hey, and thank all of you out there for watching. We've had so many new subscribers on YouTube recently in the last 3 weeks since we've created a YouTube page, and so many people that have been dedicated to watching the show, and it's been really great. And we're going to continue to improve on the quality, improve on the content of it. And continue to bring this show live. So again, tonight I want to thank Brady Davis. I want to thank Simon Roberts for coming on as our guest tonight. I want to thank Ginny Fager, AJ Fager for helping work out logistics of this. Brian Adams has been producing the show tonight, as well as the many people in chat, Roger Bishop, Nate Bennett, for helping monitor the Facebook and YouTube chats as well. We did it tonight via vMix. So while we're going to still shout out OBS because it's a free program, and you should go out and give OBS a lot of support, shout out to vMix tonight because they provided great quality transport, switching, and encoding for us as well. We're encoding, we're re-encoding or transcoding, and doing distribution via Restream.io. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers everyone. So we'll be back on here next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can check it out, facebook.com/Force Tech Solutions. Find our YouTube link there as well. We're going to have Brett Goodrich on. We're going to be talking about graphics for video. It's going to be a great stream. It's something that I know very little about. Brett knows a lot about. So it's going to be a great stream as well. So thank you all so much for joining us again. We hope that you enjoyed the show. The show is provided and brought to you by Force Technology Solutions. Force Technology Solutions is an audio-video lighting integrator. It does broadcast as well out of Indianapolis. If you have more questions on integration services provided by Force Tech, you can visit them at force.tech. So until next week, super happy to be with you guys. Have a safe week. Have a great week. And we will see you right back here. You've been watching the Pro Production Podcast.
Behind every flawless performance,
or game-changing meeting,
More important broadcast.
and even a powerful Sunday morning worship service.
there are people just like us.
well, us actually.
And we're not in it for
Thanks
the
for having
glory.
me.
We're quite content staying right here behind the
Cheers.
scenes.
It's where we belong.
It's where we want to be.
Our reward is being unseen.
because we know
That when we do our jobs well,
Most people won't realize that we've done them at all.
our mission is to partner with you.
To design the best audio, visual, and technology experience that meets your needs.
And then step back behind the curtain to make sure it always runs without a glitch.
When it does,
you get to accomplish bigger and better things.
Supported by well-designed technology.
not hindered by it.
And in the end,
Your success becomes ours.
And we wouldn't have it any other way.
We are Force Tech.
We are Force Tech.
We are Force Tech.
Oh, is that AJ wearing a tie?
The time.